Welcome back, YouTubers. Wanted to go through a favorite service of mine called Elastic Beanstalk. So, what is Amazon Web Services Elastic Beanstalk? Well, it is AWS's managed PaaS service. We're going to talk more about it, do a couple demos, and give you an idea about why you may want to use AWS Elastic Beanstalk. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, let's talk about Amazon Web Services briefly. We'll then talk about EBS and then jump over to talking about application rollouts and how you would roll out an application to EBS. We'll also get into a short demo, and I want to go through some of the monitoring and some of the capabilities around EBS, like with load balancing and scaling, for example. Because again, one of the best capabilities that this service has is that you could pretty much not only let it manage itself, but then you have the capability to get pretty granular. So let's say you want to have so many nodes deployed, you can specify that in the cluster. If you want to scale up or scale horizontally, whatever you want to do, that can be done as well. Okay, so why would a customer choose Amazon Web Services? Well, first of all, it is part of Amazon.com. Again, a very well-known, stable organization. And again, AWS was started in 2006. AWS is by far the leader in infrastructure and platform as a service in most cases. So, there may be some, what I would call, geographic preferences as far as, maybe some folks, prefer one PaaS over another. But from an industry perspective as a whole, clearly AWS has the lead. It is a very secure cloud computing platform, and again, it's easy to use. That's one of the things I do like about EBS compared to like Google App Engine. One of the challenges with Google App Engine is that nothing's really documented really well in a lot of cases. It's more of you have to be a developer or a programmer to understand what you're trying to do. But then what about if you're a developer or a platformer and you don't understand architecture? How do you, address some of the scaling and stuff? Then, again, I'm not saying that, Google's totally got it wrong, but, clearly the easy use is going to be with AWS. Plenty of services out there, again, if you're part of the Amazon Web Services partner ecosystem or you're a customer, you know that AWS is just rolling out new services like no tomorrow. It's hard to keep up. Matter of fact, it's impossible to be good at everything at this point because, again, it's so big. And again, we know that they're also adding new regions and zones as much as they possibly can. The growth is astronomical, pretty hard to keep up with. Okay, so again, just a quick little overview for those folks that may not even be familiar with AWS. Now, let's talk about applications. So one of the best practices around application deployments is that you want to typically use frameworks. You want to typically use DevOps. You typically want to use languages and workflows that make sense for your organization. Now, whether you're into Node.js or you're into Java or you're into Ruby or whatever your preferences are, chances are Beanstalk is going to be able to support you. So let's go ahead and talk more about EBS. Now, what is it? Again, let's talk about the 1,000-foot level. It's essentially PaaS for web apps. And what's really neat, and when we go through the demo, I'll show you basically the two different ways you would essentially use EBS. And again, you can have services that run in the background, or you could have a web app that runs in the front. So whether you're, Whether you're setting up basically a web service, let's say, a web front store or whatever, and you want to have applications in the back that might welcome someone as a customer, for example, using a messaging service, that can easily be done with EBS. And so the main value point, and this is one of my favorite ways to describe it, is that AWS with EBS, what they do is essentially extract the complexity of deployments by allowing you to use EBS. And I like to also describe EBS as this. It's basically a managed pool of EC2 and other services like networking and storage. So basically you're not having to worry about that infrastructure. But on the other hand, if you want to, you're welcome to modify EBS as well to accommodate that. So however granular you want to get, that capability is built in as well. So this really does an amazing job at accommodating what you're doing. Excuse me. Many of the languages are supported, as well as deployment approaches, etc. So great capability here. Now, you don't have to pay for EBS. The way it works is that you can use EBS. It's just you pay for the resources like EC2 or networking bandwidth, etc. that you're using, or the storage, or RDS, or whatever you're using. What are some of the benefits? Well, first of all, it's fast and simple to start. When we do our demo, you'll see that it's extremely easy. What should happen is that it should enhance your developers' productivity in your organization. So again, if you don't need to have a VM administrator or storage administrator in your organization, let's say you're a smaller startup and you don't have the budget for hiring new people to manage infrastructure, you could still develop your apps with EBS and not have to worry about that. It's pretty hard to outgrow. I don't like to look at anything as impossible, but again, it's pretty hard for any organization to outgrow this, because this is used by organizations large and small. So complete resource control. This is the beauty of the beast, as I like to say. And what I mean by that is, again, it's easier to show you on the console than explain on a PowerPoint. But basically, let's say you want to modify the number of nodes in your load balancing pool, you can scale like that. You want to change the AMI image and use more powerful machines, you can do that. You want to monitor with CloudWatch, you can do that. Again, this is all in your control. So EBS handles basically lots of great capabilities. Some of them are listed here. I didn't put everything on there, but also handles logging, for example, as well. But the main points is load balancing, provisioning, auto scaling, and monitoring. And again, you've got many other capabilities as well, and we'll go through and show you a few. So load balancing. Load balance is going to be very important, especially if you're developing on specific languages that, again, are lightweight but are very front-end heavy. So, again, a lot of it just depends on what you're doing. So you may need to scale up. Let's say it's a social media tie-in that you're developing. Again, social media can be very, what I would call unpredictable. And so all you need is, one epic post to just cause havoc. So again, let's say you need to scale from a couple nodes up to 10 or 20 or 100. That capability is there. You can let AWS handle your scaling, or you can keep track of it yourself. That is your choice. Provisioning, you can provision your resources again, or like it says here, EBS will handle all that for you. Let's say, for example, you have EC2 images. What are you going to do with them when you outgrow them? Do you just, let them stay the same? Do you add more resources? Do you scale up or down, whatever you so choose? And again, with auto scaling, it's going to handle a lot of that provisioning for you as well. And monitoring, you'd use CloudWatch, or again, there's API capability for you to tie into other monitoring programs if you so choose. Example of the monitoring dashboard here. Again, you could see host count, utilization, latency, etc., number of requests in, network out, network in. So pretty neat. And you have the capability to adjust the view as well. And again, we'll show you that. So how does EBS work? Now, EBS basically, again, works in a workflow. And you want to think of it as a workflow, when you're thinking about deploying an application. Again, you need to, it's like building a house. You need to make sure the foundation's there before you stick up the walls and the girders and everything like that. So you want to choose a platform. You want to, so basically a platform, and AWS speak is going to be the language. So is it going to be Node.js, or is it going to be PHP, or whatever? Then you're going to select the resources. So this is where you're going to select your AMI essentially, and any other resources that you want to adjust in that EBS instance. And we'll talk more about that as well. Then you would deploy your code essentially. Well, you would upload your code first. Again, it's basically a very simple upload. You could do that a couple different ways, but we're going to just use the interface for today. You would then launch the app, and then again, it's optional if you want to monitor everything. It's up to you, and then you just let it run. EBS will handle the rest. So again, 4 steps basically at a high level. Again, you could break it down a little bit more. So let's go ahead and do a demo. So I'm over here at my AWS console. So let's go over here. I'm going to select EBS right here. And again, there's a couple different ways. You could go in and, select it. Again, if you spell it right. Again, you could see Elastic here. So I could select that. And as you can see, I've got 3 test applications running just as an example. So I go over here, you could see that the environment is a web server, and the platform is this AMI image, and it's running Python. This one here, another image with Linux running Node.js, and this one here is PHP 7.0. And you go over here. One of the things I did want to point out before you get started, it's always a wise idea to always review the documentation. So you may want to get over here to learn more in case you haven't read anything about it. Again, it's intuitive enough to where you probably don't need to read too much about it. But, the devil's in the details, and I'll show you why. Because, again, there's a cost to the resources that you use. So if you're not reading the proper, documentation, resources, blog posts, or whatever, you choose to learn more about EBS, you might want to do that. Just because, again, if you deploy the wrong, platform types or number of nodes, you could be looking at substantial cost overruns or costs that you don't need to pay for or shouldn't have to pay for if you had paid attention. There is a CLI over here. Again, you could download the CLI as well. It is called the EB CLI, or Elastic Beanstalk CLI. Now, what's also cool is you could add a domain. So, for example, you go through AWS row 53, or you could go through any other provider like, GoDaddy seems to be one of the popular ones that people go to. Now, I'll be honest, it's 10 times easier just to go to AWS. Again, everything's integrated into AWS for you to do that. But if you go through a third party, again, a little bit more work on your side to do that. And let's go ahead and take a minute And you can see up here there's a create a new application. But before we go to create a new application, let's go take one of these. This is the default environment. And you can see that it is running version 1 Python v1. Okay. Now you can see that the configuration is on a Linux 2017. This version here running Python 3.4. Now, this is, again, just to confirm, you're running this version of the application configuration. So you could name this whatever you want. You could upload, again, a totally different version on the fly. Lots of flexibility. But let's go over here and go to change. Now, you can see over here where it says update version of the platform. Now the current platform is this. Now I'm running the free tier. Again, I am paying for resources, and again, it allows me to choose specific platforms. Now a lot of this is going to be dependent on the platform, the selection that you make. Again, a lot of this does depend as well, based on the deployment that I choose. So again, it all depends. So you go over here, you can take a look there. And let's just go back here. Let's go ahead and take this here. You can see that. Oh, let's go back. I think I wanted to select that one. And then if you go over here, you can see that I have actually more options with Node.js than I do with Python, for example. And a lot of that is just based on what resources are available with AWS at the time, what tier you're running. You know, again, I'm in the free tier, so I'm sort of limited. So again, pay attention to what you may be doing. Now, you can see here also under the monitoring dashboard here, you could see that it looked like there was an instance issue. And again, it lets you know if there is and if there's been an impact. And again, that's up to you if you want to, like, for example, tie in CloudWatch to send you alerts, for example. That's your call. You could set up alarms, etc. Now, one of the cool features is you go over here to manage updates. Now, again, if that was set up, well, what it would show you is that it would you know, again, would show you your updates that you had configured for this specific environment. So if you go over here to the config, this is actually where it's showing. So if you go over here to configuration, you could see deployments. So we've got rolling updates that are disabled. Now, that's a lot of that. If you look here, I've only got a single instance. So let's go over here, and I want to go ahead and I want to load balance this. And so basically it says that it can, again, allow me to set a time schedule for this. So let's say I want to do this after hours, or, you know, during times that I don't want to have any impact chances whatsoever. That's your call. So you could schedule that based on a scheduled action as it's called. So again, you can see load balance. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And you can see that it's going to go ahead and migrate. So let's go back to the main area here. And we'll let that do its thing. We'll check back in a minute. Now let's go over to this one here. And you can see that it's running a sample app. This is actually running PHP. And if I look on PHP, you can see again there isn't much choices available for AMIs. But again, if you want to create your own AMI, you want to use a specific EC2 AMI, that you can definitely do that. Again, plenty of flexibility if you want to add one, for example. And you can see that there's been a few issues over there. And again, let's go to manage updates. Again, nothing has been set. Again, I'm running single instance. And again, no need for me to be using resources that aren't needed. again, because again, if you do go over the free tier limit, you will get charged appropriately. Now, let's go over to events. You can see that it shows me that there's events. And I go back to health, and it's, basically says it's been up for 2 days. There's been no load balancing, so there's not much to see there. But let's go back to the dashboard, and actually let's go to the home page. And you go over here to the default config, and let's see, today is the 10th. Let's go back here. And again, you can see that, let's go ahead and refresh that. And then I could go over here, and also too, if you go here, this is the URL actually for the application. So you could see that it deployed that test app. And again, you could upload your own app, and the way you would do that is you go over here and upload a new code, or you go over here to create a new application. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go ahead and say test app 1, and I'm going to say this again is a test app. Okay, then I go create. And there's nothing there for that app, of course, because again, I didn't create one yet. So let's go create. Now, this is actually sort of the part I want to cover a little bit for you here. So there's 2 different environments. Now, when we talk about EBS, an environment is basically, is this going to be a front-end service or is this a back-end service? And so basically in this case, a web server environment, this is a front end. This is basically going to be a cloud service that is going to be serving, some kind of request. So whatever that is. It could be a merchant site, a cloud app, whatever. And then you have a worker environment. Now this is basically going to be a back-end task. In most cases, it could be, for example, an action that occurs after someone signs up from your website, let's say, or let's say, for example, an alarm is triggered or whatever. Again, I encourage you to take a look at that and figure out what makes sense. Okay. Now, you want to, of course, think about a few things before you create your environment. One of the things you want to do is, again, you change the name, whatever you want to change it. Now, one of the best practices is, of course, to name it something that you can identify easily. You could tag it and you can find it easily, especially if you have a large environment where you've got a lot of folks working in it, in your pool of instances, let's say, in EBS. So I'm going to just leave it as is. I'm not going to be too creative, but this is what you want to really pay attention to. So when you're setting up a new environment, it's going to literally set up a domain for you. So you could go ahead and, let's say, for example, I'm going to do AWS test app Nova, I don't know, 01. Let's see if that's taken. And it looks like that is actually available in US East. Now remember, this is, I'm in, I just make sure that everybody caught that. This is, again, you're going to pay attention to the region or zone that you're in. So you're going to go over here, and again, you can see I'm actually in Northern Virginia. So again, a lot of this you want to pay attention to where you're going to deploy your EBS. Okay. And again, I'm just going to put in something there. Now, platform. Now, you can see that the platforms that are based, now these are basically platforms that are ready to be, essentially deployed in EBS. There's no work on your part. So if you want to go over here and deploy, Node.js, PHP, whatever, let's say in this case I want to deploy Ruby, I can do that. Or what about if I want to deploy a custom platform? Now, because I already selected Ruby, it's not going to let me go back. But let's say if I go over here to document again, let me go. There's no way really. I again jumped ahead. But again, if I was able to select that, I would show you. But anyway, so you could see that I've got, I already deployed PHP. Let's just do Ruby since I haven't deployed one of those yet in my area, in my instance pool. Okay. Now, sample app. I'm just going to deploy the simple app. Now, again, I could deploy a test version if I so choose. Can do that. Could upload my own code as well. But again, you want to deploy a custom app if you're going to be selecting specific codes, whatever in most cases. Okay. So you can see here, I'm in the free tier eligible here. I'm going to leave it as is. But again, if you want this to be highly available where, again, you're going to be able to go between regions or zones, then you need to again realize that there's going to be a substantial cost. You could also deploy a custom config as well. And again, you can see that I'm using single instance, and if I go custom config, it'll again allow me to modify. What's also cool is I could also create this instance and place it in another AZ if I so choose. I could also let Amazon choose the best one based on the workload. And again, I could create triggers and everything like that. Now, what's also neat here is that, let's say if I reach a certain threshold, let's say the workload gets above a certain percentage or threshold, or metric actually is a term I should use, it'll automatically add a scaling operation. Basically will add more nodes or resources. So pretty neat. So again, I could save that. You go over here, for example, I could add a database. So basically it'll allow you to add a SQL database. Default here is going to be RDS, of course. And you could see that you go ahead and use a specific engine, whatever you so choose in RDS. It's already pre-built as far as the instance types. Instance class, again, this is where you have to pay attention. Again, it goes without saying that you prefer probably the larger resources, but again, if you don't need to have, if you don't have high throughput requirements or you don't have a lot of bursty data, then you probably don't need to have a large or an extra large config. But again, pay attention to what you think you may need. It'll also create the storage space for you, and again, just pay attention to that. You could also create, again, a username and password, create snapshots, etc. So pretty neat stuff. But for this purpose, I'm not going to go too much deeper into a lot of this. So I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to leave it as the free tier eligible. And you can see that it's creating that test app. Now this will take anywhere from 5 minutes to 10 minutes in most cases. A lot of it just depends on the workload. Also, too, if it's like Node.js is a very light development language compared to like Java. And again, a lot of that can take longer. So it really just depends. So again, it's already created. It's starting it up. And if I go back to all my apps, you'll see that these are green, right? And this is still gray. When this turns green, that basically says my EBS instance is up. Pretty cool, pretty easy to understand. So again, if I go to actions, I have the capability to not only save configs of this, can delete the application as well. And again, let's give it another minute. And so this will take probably another minute or two at the most. We'll go take a quick look. But in the meantime, let's go over here to this is actually a pretty interesting feature. You go swap URLs. So if I click on swap URLs, this is going to basically allow me to change the universal resource locator, just as you're aware, to a different URL. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, mainly because, let's say, for example, I have a test app and a development app. It's very common in a lot of cases to where, again, you might want to move a development instance to a production instance or vice versa. So again, changing the URL could be a good way to deploy a new version of that application. And again, back to the EBS dashboard here. So this is just about done. It usually doesn't take much longer than that. And if you go into it, let's see where it's at. It is still in start mode. And again, a lot of this is just workload based. Depends on the resources I'm using. A free tier, so I don't expect the quickest and most rapid provisioning. And then when it is up, what should happen is I'll click on the link. You can see that it still isn't available. And so I could go over here, and if I go to create and connect it to a database, it basically explains how you connect to RDS. And then I'll just go back, and that is definitely taking a little time. So we'll come back in a minute and take a look. All right, so now that the test app 1 is up, let's go ahead and take a look at it. You can see that it reports as healthy. You can see that it is the sample app and it is running Ruby. So let's go ahead and check out the URL. And it is good to go. So there you go. You just deployed a sample app in EBS.